He was a preacher's kid from South Dakota who volunteered for pilot training to prove to himself that he was not a coward. As a 24-year-old pilot, he seemed almost unnaturally calm and in control, a premature adult chosen to lead a crew of children into war. As a bomber pilot in World War II, he flew missions into the most dangerous skies in the world. And against all odds, he always brought his crew back safely. He returned to South Dakota after the war, dedicated his life to public service, spent more than 20 years in the United States Senate, and at one of his country's darkest moments, ran for president. He is George McGovern, and he is a legend of air power.
Funding provided by U.S. Selective Service, maintaining the nation's readiness. At 18, men must register at sss.gov. At 26, it's too late.
George Stanley McGovern was born July 19, 1922, in the Wesleyan Methodist Parsonage in Avon, South Dakota. His father, Joseph, was a professional baseball player turned Methodist minister. His mother, Frances, a soloist in the church choir. The Depression started in South Dakota almost 10 years before it struck the rest of the country, and most everyone McGovern met growing up was in desperate financial straits.
We were all poor, and consequently, we didn't know we were poor. There was nothing to compare yourself to. There weren't any rich people in South Dakota in the 1920s.
McGovern was 5 years old when Charles Lindbergh flew from New York to Paris. Even in the isolation of the Dakota Plains, the details of Lindbergh and the flight were all anyone talked about.
I was old enough to know that this was the greatest man in the world. That's what we thought at the time. To make that flight all alone across the Atlantic Ocean, the first human being to do that, he was a hero to everybody.
In 1928, the McGoverns moved to Mitchell, a town of around 12,000 in southeastern South Dakota. There, the McGoverns bought their first house, and the family that had moved from town to town and church to church settled in. Every young man has a defining moment, an experience that clarifies in his own mind what he is really all about. McGovern's came in a confrontation with a well-respected local coach and gym teacher.
I was probably, I don't know, maybe 13 years old, 13 or 14, and we had a coach. He was a wonderful coach by the name of Joe Quennell. I greatly admired him, as did the other boys.
One day, Quintal asked his class to jump over a leather horse, duck their heads, and roll in a kind of aerial somersault. It was a typical and not particularly difficult gymnastic move, but McGovern couldn't bring himself to do it.
I'd run up to that horse, and I'd stand there. The whistle blew. It was Joe Quennell. "What the hell is the matter with you, Mac?" I said, "Well, Mr. Quennell, I can't do that. I just can't dive. I'll break my neck." He said, "You see these other boys doing that?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You know why you can't do that? You're a physical coward." God, imagine that in front of 75 or 80 guys. It just cut me right to the quick.
From that point forward, McGovern nursed a dread that he was indeed a coward. When he graduated high school, he enrolled in Dakota Wesleyan College, just down the street from his home in Mitchell. A friend of his was trying to organize a chapter of the civilian pilot training program on campus. If he could get 10 students to sign up, the government would pay for an airplane and an instructor. McGovern, who had never been up in an airplane, signed on.
I think I did it in part to show Joe Quennell that I wasn't a coward. I couldn't jump over that horse. I still can't today do that. I'd break my neck, I think. But I wanted to show him I wasn't lacking in courage.
McGovern learned to fly in a two-seat Aeronca. He soloed after 8 hours of flight training. When he landed, he felt charged up in a way he had never felt before. He'd proved something to himself and, in a way, to Coach Quintal. In 1941, his civilian flight training complete, McGovern looked up into the sky and saw a formation of B-24s passing high overhead. Based in Omaha, Nebraska, the B-24 crews were training for a war that was clearly about to engulf the world. McGovern looked up at the planes and thought that if war came, he'd be ready to serve as a pilot.